everybody. It's your host, Brittany with Free Lady. We're on episode 15. This is a do-over already. We're just that's why we're giggling right now, because we're like 5 minutes in and I don't know what happened. You know, technology is like, gets the best of us, especially me. I'm like, ugh. Anyways, we're starting all over. This is Aaron. I'm so excited for you guys to listen to his story. His story is very powerful. We are going to start off with 3 things we're grateful for. I'm grateful for Aaron being here today. I'm grateful for all the production and productivity that I have been able to be successful at this week. And on Monday, I'm going on an early vacation to Mexico for my earliest 40th birthday. Very excited about that. So, Aaron, what are you grateful for?
I'm similarly also grateful for being here. I'm grateful for the productive week and how things have played out, and how some of the stressful times have produced great lessons. And I am very grateful for God for just I'm a very spiritual person, and I just kind of fall back on that a lot, just how everything works out and there's the beauty in everything that's happening.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. You know, I was brought up in like a Christian church and was kind of shamed in that world, if you watch my first episode. And then no one talked to me ever again. But I still was very, very spiritual my whole life. But then when I went to Lions Den Live, I realized, you know what? I need to be comfortable saying God. I need to put my knee down, and that feeling of power and strength and just having him push you in that right direction is so awesome. And so I absolutely agree with you. It's very, very cool. So this is Aaron, you guys. So Aaron, what do you do? And tell us your story from getting out of the ashes to get to where you are today.
Alrighty. So what I do today is, I primarily focus on, or not primarily, sorry, most of my secular experiences in IT work. I've been kind of a computer nerd since I was very young. But what I'm transitioning to, I should say, is more spiritual work and trauma coaching. I have found that, I've always done that throughout my life. Since I was little, every time I talked to someone, I was always the guy that the friends would call when they were going through hard times or just needed to pick me up, or, I've always tried to just help people see things in a different way that kind of help them get past stuck points. And the journey, which we got into a little bit before whatever happened, was I grew up in the Jehovah's Witness religion, which it was a very regimented lifestyle or religion. We had meetings, we went to church, so to speak, 3 times a week, every weekend or multiple times a week. You were out banging on doors, handing out watchtowers, trying to get other people to, join the Ponzi scheme. Or and then every night, you were reading the Bible, or it was very regimented and very strict. And as I got older, I started to question a lot of this.
Right.
It just seemed very odd how, one of the best examples was, I had a friend, and he was Mormon, that I had met in high school, and he was hilarious. And he was a really good guy. Like, he was a really good person. Whereas, a lot of the other kids I knew in my own church, like, they were dickheads. So it was weird how, you'd go and it's like, these are not really good people, the ones I know, and this is a really good person. And these guys are telling me that God's going to kill that guy. So I remember started asking a lot of questions like, that doesn't really make sense to me. Like, why do these beliefs not match what Jesus is saying? And I shared this example before. It's like, the divinity you assign to Jesus Christ in his message, however divine you think he is, it's interesting how he came down, told us to not judge each other, so we murdered him and built systems of judging each other in his name, right? Like,
That's the truth. Yeah.
Right. Like, he came down and it was like, hey, you got anyone with the first sin can, or, he who is without sin may cast the first stone. And, it's like, so we threw him anyway. And so as I grew up, I really started to question a lot of these beliefs, and I didn't agree with them. And, every answer you'd get when you asked something was like, oh, just take it on faith. And it's like, well, no, these are, there's an elephant in the room, and we should talk about this. That's not something we can really take on faith. So, at the age of 17, one morning, my dad came in and he said, hey, get up, we'll go to church. And he said, I'm not going. He said, well, then you can't live in this house, get out of my house. And so my grandma had some land that there were a few homes on. One of the buildings was like this little 20 by 20 shop with a little kitchenette and then, bathroom. And so it was used as book storage. So my aunt and uncle, like, just, it was stuff piled up all in this place. And so I moved in there. And my uncle, he was really into the occult, right? And so at this point, in my life, I had really drank the Kool-Aid hard when I was in the religion. Like I was out there banging on doors like, you need to hear what Jesus has to say. I ate it up.
Right.
So now that I had been kind of rejected by everyone I knew, being disfellowshipped, people would not give me the time of day on the street. I worked at KFC, and if people from the church came in, they'd walk up and be like, oh, and they'd leave. It's like, well, I mean, you could still get chicken. I'm not, so anyway.
I get it. I've had that experience.
Yeah, it's a
Weird.
fascinating thing. It's like, there's no Satan in here, I promise.
Right.
I wouldn't even know how to put it on the chicken. And so my uncle was really into the occult, and because of being separated like that, I really, I blame God for all this. So, it was like, screw God, screw the religion, screw my parents, everything, everyone. But I was sheltered in this lifestyle. So, I wasn't really exposed to like horror movies or drugs or any of that. And the first night I stayed in that shed, or that shed, they called it the shed, whatever. My uncle came in, he said, hey man, whatever happens tonight, they're just trying to scare you. And I said, what do you mean? Right? Like, what does that even mean? And he's like, just remember that, like, whatever happens tonight, they're just trying to scare you. And so I'm thinking maybe he's talking about my parents. I don't know. And at some point, so turns out that place was haunted as fuck.
Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no.
So like in the middle of the night, like someone's banging on my door, the door handle's rattling, right? So I'm like, hello. And like, it's not locked. This is on, like on the inside of a bunch of land, come in, and it's just bang, 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 rattle, rattle, rattle. So I walk over and I open the door, and there's no one there, but the wind just ripping on the outside. So now I immediately remember what he just told, right? Like, whatever happens, they're just trying to scare you. And I'm like, there's no way there's fucking ghosts, right? Ghosts don't exist, and that's just demons. They're trying to kill you. So all this stuff's running through my head.
Oh my gosh.
I shut my door, and my sink, which is, 15, 20 feet behind me, like turns on full blast. So now I, shut the door and I start walking towards my sink. I reach out to shut it off, and it shuts off, right? So now I'm like, I am freaked the fuck out. So I'm standing there just like kind of frozen, and I'm watching it now. It starts just turning on and off, and then the door goes at it again. Bang, bang, bang. The door handle's rattling. And I mean, I'm like terrified now. So I run back into the room. I get under the covers, and I mean, I cried myself to sleep, just like, they're just trying to scare you. They're just trying to scare you. They're just trying to scare you. So
dude,
next day he comes in all nonchalant, like, hey, just so you know, that'll never happen again. For whatever reason. So yeah, he said for whatever reason, it's only the first time someone stays on that property. Freaking, it is haunted, like it lights up like the 4th of July, but for that one person, right? And he was right. This never happened again to me.
Wow.
So one time I had a friend over, because where I lived, it was kind of the party house. This was a terrible thing for a situation being in, but I was right across the street from the high school with my own place. So, my fridge was stocked with alcohol, and I was on all the cool drugs. Like my life quickly fell apart. But I had a friend over. He stayed the night because he was going to go to school the next day. And I walked out in the morning. I mean, he's rocking in the fetal position on my couch. And he's like, did you know your sink turns on and off in the middle of the night? I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about that, because it hasn't happened. Like, it only happens the first time. But yes. So
holy moly.
What's that?
I said, holy moly. I know people don't say that anymore, but I do.
Yeah, it's quite the experience. And especially, growing up, that was all very demonic, and,
right.
all these horror, fire and brimstone stories. So this is something I guess I haven't really talked to many about, but because I was completely inexperienced in the world, and some may be learning this for the first time on your podcast, but a friend of mine, I had my own place, a childhood friend that had also left the church a long time ago. He knocked on my door one day and he's like, hey, bro, I'm in a bad way. Can I stay at your place?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not going to say no. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm a refugee in this house too, like, come
Right.
on in. And then he introduced me to crystal methamphetamines.
Oh shit.
So that started it was probably 7 months where I was addicted to it. I was
Yeah.
very strongly addicted to it. And there were two events that happened within close proximity. Or one, I was at a party with a lot of other druggies, right? So like we were at the main drug dealer's house, and there's drugs, party, alcohol everywhere. And my girlfriend, she had called and she was like, hey, my parents aren't home. You should come over. Hey, Roger that. So I go grab my friend's keys and like, hey, I'm gonna borrow your car. I'll be back in a little bit. He's like, okay, sure. So I leave the party. I go down to her house, which is a block and a half away, maybe, right?
Okay.
As I'm pulling up to her house, her parents are pulling in the driveway. Oh, man. So I turn around to go to the party.
Yeah.
And as I get back to the party, like SWAT is taking people out, right? Like they had gone in and raided shortly after I had left that place.
Wow.
Yeah, like it. So of course, I'm freaking out. I'm looking for a place to ditch my friend's car.
Yeah.
Hike to a McDonald's, use a payphone, call another friend because I was a town away from where I lived.
Right.
So it was this very close call with, everyone in there went to jail in some aspect. Um, and then it wasn't long after that I had a mild overdose with that same drug.
Hmm.
And so I remember just sitting there thinking, like, I can't go on like this. Like, this is, if I continue in this lifestyle, like, I will be dead or I will go to prison.
Right.
Those two messages are very loud. So
Right.
that's one of the reasons I ended up in the Marine Corps. Was I went down to the recruiter's office and was like, who's got a bus that's leaving tomorrow? Who's
Yeah.
got a bus that's leaving tomorrow? And like, well, Marine Corps infantry leaves tomorrow. Like, all right, where do I sign? Like,
Yeah.
well, you got to take all these tests and yada yada yada. So um so
Dang.
like, you should wait and join, some other MOS. Don't go to the infantry. And I'm like, when's that bus come? Oh, in 6 months. Nah, I won't be here in 6 months. I'm leaving tomorrow. um and so now, right, so like I'm this scared kid just kind of running from
Yeah.
things,
Right.
run from the religion, where I'm telling everybody like, hey, life's going to be perfect here really soon. We're all going to love each other and build
Yeah.
bonfires and tell each other stories and scratch
Yeah.
each other's backs. And now I'm training to go overseas to fight a war, right? Which I
Wow.
have no concept of as this
Right.
kid who didn't play sports and wasn't allowed to hang out. I was like up there preaching
Yeah.
about Jesus, and I was like, here's how you use an M16 and break it down. And the unit I got attached to was 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, and the Thundering Third. They were the most deployed. We weren't special forces, right? It's not like we were this elite unit. They're just
Right.
considered the most deployed. Anytime if we were in the area and there was some crazy shit, it was usually 3, 4 that got picked to go in and do the crazy shit.
Right.
So shortly into my overseas deployment, I found myself in the first Battle of Fallujah. You can look up what happened there, but you won't find anything that's true, or completely true, I should say.
That makes
Because there's a lot of things that happen that,
Yeah.
after leaving, you'd go look it up, and like operation names have changed.
Oh wow.
Reports were grossly lower than, what you could see on the ground. And so, anyway, without, going into that really fucked me up. Fallujah, being in Fallujah, kind of seeing the atrocities of warfare,
Okay.
it was really hard on me.
Right.
Um, and so coming home, I think I was engaged at the time, and that completely fell apart.
Right.
I ended up going UA or what's considered AWOL from the Marines. They were putting me on like, a whole host of medication. I was being signed up for experiments on things. I was like, I don't have those problems. And they're like, well, we're going to sign you up for this anyway.
Oh my
Like, no, I
God.
don't want to do this shit. So
Holy moly.
yeah, I ended up I was gone for about 6 months, which, if you run from the military in a time of war, that's generally not looked, highly upon. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's not sustainable. Right. So I went back, turned myself in, went through a whole process of psychiatrists, all this different stuff. And they ended up just processing me out medically. 2005, August of 2005. So in that time, that short time, I had met my wife in the time from coming back from the war, leaving my fiance. I had met my wife. We quickly became pregnant. So now I get discharged and I'm out of the military and a brand new father, still carrying the ghosts of my past, the ghosts of the
Yeah.
past before my past, and then the ghosts,
Yeah.
so
That's a
that
lot.
didn't go well. Like, yeah, like I was not a good person. If you met me 15 years ago, like
Yeah.
I hated me. I was,
Yeah.
very mean to people, very angry, uh, a complete mess, just a mess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I
there
understand.
was, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I just said I understand. I understand.
Um, and I would say, I kind of walked aimlessly through life for a while, right? I worked 40 to 80 hours, kind of poured myself into work, became a workaholic, climbed up pretty quickly at any of the companies I would join, but I wasn't really happy. I wasn't making any progress. Uh, for my PTSD, I was seeing a shrink, two different shrinks once a week. So I had 2 appointments a week. I had a pill tracker. I had two of those. One I'd take in the morning, one I'd take at night, and they were full of all these different medications, SSRIs, tranquilizers, just valproic acid, all kinds of stuff. It's like, oh, you're messed up these different ways, and we're gonna prescribe you all this garbage. Um, and my growth started, I would say, so I've got all this baggage I had with me through life, and my oldest son Drake, he was about 5 years old, and I was very artistic as a kid. Like I said, I wasn't like the sportsy run around type. I was the drama club. I draw, and I was the funny kid, and but I loved drawing, and I remember there were drawings I had made where it was like a girl from a magazine. So she was in a bikini and she was hanging up a towel, one specific. So I had just kind of copied this artwork to see if I could draw it by looking at it. And
Yeah.
it probably looked terrible, but as a kid, I thought it looked really good. Like I did a good job kind of copying this image.
Yeah.
My dad had gone through my artwork and thrown it out because it wasn't appropriate for the church, or I was like, oh, this is pornography. I'm like, she's got clothes on. What do you mean it's pornography? Um, and so, anywho, fast forward, when I had children, the only example I had was my dad, and he
Right.
was not the greatest father. He didn't have a good father before him.
Mm.
And, especially with the whole military Marine Corps thing, I was very hard on my first child. And so he was probably about 5 years old. I remember I went into his room and I was like, hey, Drake, you got to clean up your room.
Yeah.
And he was coloring some. He's like, all right, Dad, just a minute. And he's coloring. And I didn't have much patience. I was very quick to anger. I was like, Drake, you need to clean up your room right now. I'm getting heated. And
Yeah.
he's like, okay, Dad. And he starts like, scribbling faster because he knows his dad gets mad. And then I was like, clean up your room right now, yelling. I grabbed his picture and I ripped it up. And
Oh,
he melted. Yeah, absolutely. Like
yeah.
he fell on the ground, like went into the fetal position, started crying. And like in that moment, like it hit me like, oh, whoa, like, dude,
Right.
you're being the guy that you hated so much for being a shit dad. Like what the fuck are you doing with your life? So that was probably the moment for me that was like, I need to make some changes. Like I can't do this because I can't give him the shit that
Yeah.
I now am struggling to carry with me through my life. Um, and so that started this very long journey. That was oh man, how was it? Five. I was about 25. So I still wasn't completely mature, right?
Yeah.
But I knew like I had all these demons with me. And that started me trying to, reconcile things with my parents, which of course, unless I go like bow down and worship some dude in a back room, pulling levers, I will never be accepted again into kind of that community. So I struggled with that for a long time. I hated on my parents for a long time, so that turned into anger towards my father. Like, oh, why couldn't you love me? Why couldn't you just
Right.
be a better dad?
Right.
Carried that with me for a long time. And then in 2017, let me back up a little bit. So when I started that journey, I looked to a lot of the things, let's say you wanted to start a journey of self-improvement and you were not
Right.
exposed to a lot of the coaching groups you're in,
Right.
any of this.
Right.
You'd probably go to a Google browser and be like, stop being whatever kind of person you're trying to stop being, or mental health or
Yes.
therapist.
Yes. Yes.
And you get kind of funneled into this system where it's like, well, hey, let's just talk about how crappy you are every week. And then try and find in the past where that comes from. And then we'll just have you think about that for a week. And then we'll talk about how bad it made you feel next week. So it's like, there's
Yeah.
this system of that's not
Yeah.
really helping, but I mean, shit, you're trying. Right.
Right.
And so I did that for a while, and I, made progress on some things, not much progress on other things. And tying back to that haunted house experience, ever since I was like that age, I had been fascinated by the occult. So that also started kind of this, Batman identity of at night, I would just go start reading anything and everything I could find, every translation, every text, any, world religion, like, oh, hey, here's a bunch of garbage that people used to
Yeah.
believe in. Fuck yeah, I want to read it, like
Yeah.
figure out
It's
what this is all
fascinating.
about.
It's very fascinating.
Oh yeah, and it's also interesting that
Yeah.
when you start looking at all these different pieces or all these different translations, the or spiritual books, let's say,
Sure.
in every single one of them, you're going to find the golden rule.
Yeah.
In every single one of them, you're going to find kindness and
Mm.
forgiveness and love. And so it's like, it's interesting because, the more you would start to investigate, the more you found the same message.
Right.
And it's in every single one of them. Of course, it's just, convoluted with all these other things like, oh, don't cut trees down on Saturday when the moon's full because God doesn't like that shit. Where do you get this stuff from? There's all this other.
It's true though. It's
It
so
is.
true.
It's so fascinating, like,
But then you have
yeah, I could go on with that
judging
for
each other too. Like, oh, well, we're in this religion, so we can't talk to you. And oh, we speak this way, so we can't love you. It's so effed up. It's just like,
that's the exact
I don't,
opposite of
I
what
mean,
they said to do.
right. I know there's great churches out there, but I don't like going to church. The spirituality of human beings and love and actual, loving each other, being kind to each other, being there for your people, giving a stranger a hug, putting your knee down to let someone lead you to be a leader. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's what religion is to me. That's what spirituality is to me. So yeah, it's crazy, but you're totally right. I have read into other things too, and it goes into like still love each other, still like lead with kindness, still forgive each other. But everyone seems to like put that in their back pocket and totally forget about not I'm sorry, not everyone. But you know what I mean.
I absolutely do. And
Yeah.
I am highly critical of, like you say, it's not necessarily spirituality, it's this unquestioned religion.
Mhm.
Um, because I think there's a lot of danger there, right? I witnessed this growing up where, it's like we went to church on every day, whatever, and we talk about how, God loved the world so much, he gave his only begotten son, God is love, God loves all of us, we're all of his children. And then I was like, you'd have that. And then out of the other side of your mouth is, here's the 10,000 things you got to do so you don't get tortured by God forever.
Right.
What game is this guy playing? Like, it just
Right?
seems fucked up. Like, I love you. Oh, does it? Does it? Oh,
Oh yeah. I was brought up like everything was a sin. I got
yeah.
to high school and I was like, what? Like, oh my God, like
Fireballs are going to start dropping soon.
Totally, totally,
Right.
totally. And then you kind of grow up into this as you're transitioning into loving who you are. I mean, this was like for me, for example, you felt guilty about everything. And I still carry guilt with certain things.
Mhm.
It's so hard to let go of because you're so brought up with these rules, 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 rules. And you're like, it's a lot of guilt that you have to like tear yourself away from. You know what I mean?
So I know exactly what you mean. And this may be out of character or podcast or whatever, but I'd like to share something with you that I think might help with that. And
Oh, I would
do
love
you,
to hear it.
do you remember the Garden of Eden story?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what you remember about the Garden of Eden story? Like, what was the original sin?
The original sin was she like bit into the apple because she wasn't supposed to. And then the snake, all that crazy shit happened to her because she didn't listen to what he was trying to tell her to do.
Love that. I love that. Thank you. So now the reason I say that is because that's a very typical recollection of that story.
Yeah.
First off, the word apple is not in that book.
Yeah.
Second,
That's all I remember.
God.
I haven't really read the whole Bible. Okay. I mean, I was brought up in this in Christianity for sure, but like,
Mhm.
I've never read the Bible.
And that's totally fair.
That's what I remember. That's what I think about. Like she sinned, and like she got to the snake came at her, and I know that's like a child story, but that's roughly how I remember things.
I'd like to give you a version of it that again, you can go read this if you'd like, right?
Yeah,
But just a different way of looking at it that completely changes this whole concept of what we should feel, quote unquote, guilty about.
yeah,
And if you go back to the story, so God makes the earth and he's like, hey, Adam and Eve, check this place out. It's all yours. You know, take care of it, have a bunch of kids, have fun, go surfing,
yeah,
whatever you want to do, right?
yeah,
And now he didn't say, and if you touch that, I'm gonna fuck you up. That wasn't the direction. The direction was, hey, you guys see that tree over there? That tree contains the knowledge of good and evil.
yeah,
The day you partake of it, you're gonna die.
yeah.
That was it. That was the warning. Not like I'm gonna come find you and murder you. It
Right.
was that contains the knowledge of good and evil. And the day you think you know what right and wrong is, that's when you're gonna die. Right now, what has every war been fought over?
Mhm.
We're right, you're wrong.
Right.
Let's go kill them.
Right.
Right. And so, going back to that, like the again, it wasn't like God was punishing Adam because he did something. God
Right.
didn't punish him for it.
Right.
But Adam was now conscious. He looked down. He's like, "Oh snap! I'm naked. That's not good. I should put some clothes on." Right? And God's like, "Who told you you were naked? Oh snap! You ate of that tree, didn't you? That
Yeah.
now gives you the ability to be like, oh my gosh, that's wrong."
Yeah.
And so,
Interesting.
yeah, and so like, look at sin, right?
Yeah.
What is sin? And again, a lot of people think like, well, it's something we're doing that's pissing God off.
Right.
If God told you you got to do anything you wanted, why would he then turn around and be like, oh, I can't believe you just did that? Like,
Right.
you said I could do that. So
Right.
if you think about this concept of sin, what are the seven deadly? When we won't list them, but the seven deadly sins, let's just
Right.
take like pride, right? Now, if you were a extremely prideful person, do you think you would have a good quality of life or good views of yourself or healthy habits, or would you lead like a very good lifestyle?
I mean, it just depends on how prideful you are, I guess. I mean, pride can also lead into confidence, and confidence can, help others. That's where how my mind goes. Pride is confidence to help others. But if you're too prideful, you're not looking at anything else because you think everything is right. So there's two things to that, you know.
That's fair, but it has this potential. Like if you were to chase it so far, it has the potential
Right.
to do a lot of damage to you.
Absolutely. Yes.
So the same with greed, right? It's not necessarily like bad to say, hey, I want something, but if you become extremely greedy, you're not going to live a great life. You're not going to have great relationships with people. So it
Exactly.
wasn't these things, if you look at them, if you change the perception of them from it's something you're being punished for to, it's anything you really do to punish yourself.
Hmm.
Right? Is it a sin
Right.
for you to go have an alcoholic drink? Of course not.
Right.
Would you be hurting yourself though if you went and had 50?
Absolutely.
Right. There's
Absolutely.
no one that's sitting there writing this shit down like, oh, she did it again. Now her score's gone negative. It's ridiculous.
Right.
Like,
But it's weird because like, with my mom, she was such a uber Christian. There's nothing wrong with that, but she hid
mhm.
everything about her past into religion. So we also, and this is not just her, this is a lot of people that read into it differently. And then they're like, everything is sin, y'all. Everything,
God
and
sounds so
so
boring.
yeah. And it's like, and I thought I was such a bad kid. You
Yep.
know, I mean, I did get kicked out when I was 17. I lived with my grandma too. And then I moved out on my own. But like, looking back, I was like, dude, I was not a bad kid. I didn't like do drugs. I didn't like, I mean, I started drinking alcohol like at parties when I was a senior. And all my friends oh, we were doing that when we were freshmen. What?
I,
What? And I was just like, and I remember
I
I go to
couldn't
my
stay
first
up past 8.
yeah, I remember going to my first party. I'm like in the corner and all these people are drunk and making out with each other. And I'm like, what is going on? you know, I was like mortified and mesmerized at the same time. But I just wanted to see
The
the world.
Lord is
I wanted to
testing
play
me.
soccer. I want to hang out with my friends and I wanted to see the world. And really, like, that's not being a bad person at all. It's being a kid growing up and learning about who they are. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Absolutely
So,
agree.
yeah. But overall, I'm glad where I'm at today. You watch, like you said, you saw how your dad was, and then
Hmm.
you kind of saw a reflection. You were mirroring mirror. I swear I can't say some words sometimes. But it's like I kind of had that a moment of truth in my life where I was like, "Oh shit, I'm like becoming my mom." Nope. Like I can do better than that.
Yep.
I can do better than that. So, that's kind of what, you know, just kind of brought me out of like all the depression I was in, just like you're staying up all night reading all these things and coming to back to the same message. Be kind, love one another, forgive each other, you know. So what happened like after you started like really getting into all these things and everything was the same message? Like what was that doing for you?
So there's a few things that kind of happened all at once, so to speak. For a long time after that first encounter with my son, that I kind of woke up to how I was acting or growing up or any of that. Um I blamed my parents.
Mm,
I was very angry at them. I had a lot of anger towards them, and I would lash out. They wouldn't answer any of my calls because I was disfellowshipped. I wasn't allowed to visit. Like, I haven't really had more than 10
yeah.
hours of conversation with them in the last 15 years.
Oh,
Because oh yeah, like my mom blocks my number because it's that dogmatic religion saying, you can't talk to these people because that's how Satan gets in you, and this
still
is
to this
wild
day?
rules. What's that?
Still to this day?
To this day, yeah. I think I tried to call my dad, I want to say in February. And I called, he answered, hey, this is Bill. I was like, hey, Dad, it's Aaron. He said, who? I said, it's Aaron, your son. And he was like, oh, I got to get on a meeting. So how about I call you back? And I was like, okay. And he hung up and I haven't heard back. Like it's a fascinating religion. What it does to the human psyche is wild. But anyway, so I hated them for a long time.
Yeah, it
But
was.
then I started really, as I explored kind of the shadow work, the darker side of myself, I came to appreciate a lot of what they did.
Huh.
Right. My dad being the dad he was physically abusive when I was younger. And then, when he found Jesus, it turned all into, emotional and verbal. And
Huh.
so,
I understand.
um, but I really like, it taught me so much. It taught me so much of what love was and what love was not.
Huh.
Uh, and because I was sit there, forced to read the Bible for hours,
Yeah.
um, like I could pull up any scripture, in talking with anyone. If they're like, "Oh, I don't understand this," it's like, "Well, here's this to think about, right? Like, why not look at this scripture?" Or so it's actually in many ways helped me serve other people, who are struggling with their relationship with God, who found themselves in my position where,
Right.
this happens a lot where kids get into these dogmatic religions and, much like me, they reject their parents for this crazy stuff, but then they
Right.
also lump in God with that and say, well, God's stupid. That's a dumb idea. Like, why would God let
Yeah.
a kid have cancer?
Right.
Right. And it's
Right.
so,
Right.
it helped me connect with them. And then, so, here comes kind of the steroids to the growth kind of thing. In 2017, my brother called me randomly and he was like, hey, bro, you want to go to Peru and do ayahuasca? That I'd been reading about it, coincidentally, because there's all these coincidences.
And
And if you knew,
had a religion. I mean, you had a relationship with your brother. Like your parents didn't tell him to cut you off, or was he older or
uh,
younger than you?
so he is my older brother. Dave was
Okay.
kind of the first one that rejected the religion.
Okay.
And then, so I have 3 siblings that are not practicing,
Okay.
that we don't talk much because
Okay.
it was interesting growing up. Like, we weren't a strong family unit.
Mhm.
So I communicate with my sister every now and then. I talk to my older brother now a lot, but
Okay.
prior to that, we'd talk, the family would talk to one another maybe once a year or something.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so he calls me out of the blue, like, hey, let's go to Peru and do ayahuasca, which, before, back then, I should say, anytime we made plans, we always flaked out on each other. So I was like, yeah, sure, no problem, bro.
Yeah.
Go ahead and get everything ordered and I'll meet you in Peru. And he called me back and he's like, all right, man, tickets are booked. Like,
Oh
get your
my God.
passport. Fuck. Like, all right, I guess we're going to Peru. Um, and yeah, that was like, I kind of lollygagged my way through that, as in I didn't take things serious. I didn't
Right.
really understand the power of the medicine.
Yeah.
The retreat reached out and they're like, make sure you follow a good diet, or this
Oh
medicine
my
will
gosh. Okay.
really be hard on you. Which, I was like drinking a Red Bull as I pulled into wherever we're supposed to be, didn't pay
Oh
attention to any of that shit.
no.
Yeah, it's
Oh
like
no.
totally didn't pay attention, nonchalant, like not a care in the world.
Oh
But
no.
that was hard. That really, the first night was, hours and hours and hours of purging. um but the second night, when you do ayahuasca, before you drink, you always set an intention, meaning
Okay.
you basically focus on the medicine and you communicate what you want it to heal, or what you would like to process, or what you would like to know.
Right.
And the people of the Amazon, and anyone who does ayahuasca, believes that there's an entity behind this medicine. They down there, they call her Mother Ayahuasca. When I
Hmm.
met her in my visions, she looked like you ever see Pocahontas, the Disney cartoon?
Oh yeah.
Looked like the grandma tree. It was like the grandma
Oh,
tree. She came up and like she gave. It was really cool. I was having a vision where I
that
was
is
back when I was
cool.
14, and me and my dad had kind of this defining moment in our relationship. And I was like holding my little self, and I was like, dude, he didn't know how to love you. He didn't have a good dad. And then Mother Ayahuasca came up and like hugged us both.
Oh,
And
that's
then we had like this moment where she showed me my future, which later came true in like 2019. Yeah, it is a wild
wow.
experience. Yes. If you were wondering about, like, oh, is there, things behind the veil, like ayahuasca will put that question to rest. Like, time
Absolutely.
does not exist when you're on it. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I've read about, I've never done it before. I find it very fascinating. I hope I had that experience sometime, just because like I want to have a spiritual experience, because I definitely have heard so many great things from it.
mhm.
Um, because people judge you, oh, you're doing drugs. Like, bitch, no. You can look it up. I love that. I love being connected behind the veil. I'm very intuitive, and so like I would love to try that someday. And I think that's a really cool experience so far that you're saying.
So there is a group, just so you know, and I'll send you some info about this after. There's a group I'm putting together for this January to go back to the same place I was in the first time in 2017. But
Oh, that's
we'll
cool.
yeah, we'll talk about that after. But so the second night, you give it your intention, right? After you do your
Right.
purging, then that's when you really start having visions. And I won't go into like too much detail about that second night, because I mean I'll start sobbing, but I had asked to process my war trauma. And I don't know, I don't know how to like cliff notes this. On ayahuasca, it showed me a lot of things, right? And so to your point about guilt, um, every day after I got home, it was like every night I'd go to bed with ghosts. It was like I went to bed with people I had hurt or people whose lives I had taken. And it's like I always carried it with me. And I'd always tell myself, and anytime you you talk to someone that you feel comfortable enough sharing that shit with, they always come back with the same thing. It's like, bro, it was you or them, or you were following orders, or you just did what you had to do to survive. And I realized on ayahuasca that that's an excuse. That's just something you tell yourself to make you feel better about this really shitty thing you did. And there's a lot of people, well, you're in the military, what are you going to do, not pull the trigger? It's like, well, that's exactly what I could have done, right? At any time I could have made the conscious decision to not engage. Now you're right, there are consequences, and that could have gone to jail or whatever, been killed by my whatever.
Yeah.
You're right, but I still made that decision. And so that was made, I had these in that vision, I had to re-experience everything I had done, and like I had to hold every person I had harmed. And I mean, you're there. It's completely it's not like I kind of see lights. Like you wake up in a different place when you're on ayahuasca. There's the full experience. And the last part of that, second to the last part, was there was a little villager kid. His name was Caesar. He'd run around during the day. He was funny as shit. But the villagers that lived in the Amazon jungle, kind of around this place, that owned the land, they would come in, help with ceremony, cook food. They'd wash your clothes if you asked them to. Make sure the towels are folded, shit like that. Mm-hmm. And there was this little kid, Caesar, and he'd run around, play tag or whatever. Because the only reason you're there is to do ceremony at night. The rest of the day, you're swinging in a hammock, reading a book, talking, shooting the shit with other people there. And towards the end of my vision, I'm in this like pool of blood, and I look down and I'm holding this little kid, Caesar, and I had gotten the sense that I had killed him. And when I had looked up, like his father Luce was looking at me, and he's like, like, what did you do? And it was in that moment that I knew, like I couldn't say like, oh, I was just following orders, or I did what I had to, none of those excuses were going to bring his kid back. And there was that moment of realization, like you have to take responsibility for this. Like you cannot keep dodging it with excuses. And so like I wept, like that whole vision. Oh my God, I was crying the whole time. But when I kind of accepted that, it was cool, because then Caesar, he jumps out of my arms and he's like, it's okay, and he runs off laughing. And it was like I was at the bottom of a mountain, and I was just on my knees, and I was so tired. I was so tired. Things were so heavy. And this entity had come up next to me, and it's like she took a backpack off my back and she set it on the ground. I mean, this thing hit the ground so hard, it like felt like it shook me. And it was like when you work with spirit, it's not like you don't get words, it's more like ideas are presented to you. Mm-hmm. And it was, the message I got from that was, you can't carry this. You can't keep carrying this. You have to acknowledge that you did something wrong. You participated in that act, but now you have to let that go, and you have to figure out how you can use whatever experience you got out of that to be better and to help people forward. Like you don't have to carry it with you. And so a lot of that shame is, I find there's a lot of that shame in the things we do. But we have to understand, kind of like what I came to with my parents, was it had to happen that way. Right. There was no other way I could have become the person I am now. Like Absolutely. If I had parents that let me go out and, hang out with my friends, I wouldn't have near the the speaking ability, because I was up, in church. Like I said, I drank the Kool-Aid hard in that
Right.
religion. So like I was giving talks and I was reading the Bible in front of people and damnation's coming for y'all, which was a little silly. But now I look back and it's like, wait a minute, I can get up quite easily and speak to people.
Hmm.
I have that public, I can walk up, to someone's door and just be like, hey, blah, blah. So it gave me a lot of tools that I otherwise probably would not have gotten.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
similarly with kind of all this other traumatic experiences I had, um, it gave me a lot of different tools, a lot of experiences, and a lot of lessons. And so I would say, that's where someone posed a question to me one time, and I won't tell you the entirety of this story because this was a mind fuck in itself. But someone I didn't know asked me, of all the lessons you've learned,
Mm.
which are you applying?
Ooh.
And that took me off guard because that was right at a time where my personal development was really kind of starting, and I was looking back about all these
Yeah.
things, and I mean that really hit me. But that's what drove me to now start, like, hey, I understand why people struggle with this stuff. Like
Right.
it doesn't make sense. It feels like,
Right.
the ghosts of your past are just clinging to you, and it's like you're carrying around a block of limestone or some shit.
Right. Right.
And so, man, if you can learn how to, oh shit, snip, snip, like
Yeah.
that is so freeing. And I love being able to talk to people and just helping them have that moment where they're like, huh, huh. You know what? You're right. I don't even have to worry about that shit. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
live my life now. It's like, oh,
Yeah. That's
go, yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's a beautiful story. And personally, I've never actually like looked like back, like and like what kind of tools did I learn? And it was kind of I've looked back at like, you know, what my mom did not accept of herself and never accepted, never dealt with. And so I've always lived my life like I need to deal with my shit. I need to talk about it. I need to make myself right in every single way. Um, but I never looked at it like that, like really going back of like what church did teach me, because I love going to church. I love going to my
Mhm.
youth groups. I had friends there. I love my pastor. We did a lot of cool things. Like we united as one. We went to, places to serve others. Like it was really, really cool, and when people didn't talk to me when I went back, like I was like, very cool. And then years later, I'm working in a flower shop and the pastor comes in and he turns around because I was working there, just like you were talking about earlier, and I was just like, man, so you kind of, put it away in a box. But, I had such a great experience. I've never said that I never did not have a good experience with that. I'm really grateful. I feel like, those types of ways in religion when you're little because you don't really see what's going on, at least it teaches you like, to be thankful and to be kind, and you're around all these people that are teaching you that, and it brings you up into kindness, you know um but I just never really looked at it that way. I just knew that like I have nothing bad to say. I had a bad experience, but
Sure.
I will never like look back and say that was bad. I never have, but I guess that's, you are getting helped at that time in church, whether you see it or not. And it does, it can't go back. But I guess, I've learned to be kind from it. But I just never looked at it that way. So, you know what I mean? But so now you've learned all these things, you're able to look back. Because a lot of times when we're in the darkness, that's when we learn the most, right?
Hmm. I agree.
That's when we learn the most. And being in the dark is, in my past, like I thought it was again like a sin, and I felt guilty because I was in the dark, when really it teaches you the most about yourself, and you just got to sit in it. And so with all this experience you have, like, what are you doing with it now? And are your kids, I know this is two questions. I do ask loaded questions. So question one, what are you doing with it now? Question two, with your children, are they seeing this like beautiful like transformation in you and like you feel like you have a closer relationship to your kids? Because you're always being watched,
Oh,
right?
yes. So, what I'm doing with it now, question A, is sharing it, right? Like it's interesting. Um, I'm sure you'll agree, you can see how things kind of fall into place. Like you can see God's hand at work, so to speak. You'll be having a conversation with someone and they ask you about something and you share something like, oh my God, I really needed to hear that today. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't even know why I felt like sharing that with you, but have a nice day.
Yeah.
Um, I'm finding myself put in a lot more of these situations where I'll be talking to someone and something comes up and it's like, oh, hey, I've run into something like that too. Have you tried looking at it this way? Right. And so
Yeah.
kind of like I said before, it helps them get around whatever they're struggling with, or maybe just see things in a different way,
Right.
which maybe then gives them an idea on how to solve their own problem. It's not like,
Right.
anyway, trying to share it, right? With my kids, they do. And so that's been like really fun, right? With Drake, it's a little bit harder because he was a lot older. I'm not gonna degrade my soon to be ex-wife in any way. We've had a very tumultuous relationship, right? Like it's interesting, we're both great people, but then when we're together, it's weird how we both get very, like, when you put two magnets together and they just start pushing each other
Yeah.
away, we have this weird dynamic. So it's like we were together to bring our children into this world. But so anywho, Drake, it's a little harder. I'm working on that relationship. I'm spending a
Yeah.
lot more time with him, talking to him, but he's 17 now. He's at the age where, like, okay, screw you, dad. But we're still talking a lot more, it's been a lot better than it has traditionally.
Yeah.
My youngest two children, absolutely, right? So Destin actually went with me to Arizona. There was a Lions Den meetup down there,
Oh, cool.
that I had been asked to go down, share some jungle medicine. I went and did like a little breathing ceremony. So he actually helped record the ceremony so I could get it for content. Did a terrible job. I can't use any of it as content, but he enjoyed it.
Bless his
He had a lot
heart.
of fun. What's that?
I said, bless his heart.
Yeah, well, so it was funny because he was trying to do, cool stuff with the camera, like shaking it back and forth or like make cool pictures, but it just came out grainy and like not zoomed in on anything. And like you could hear his hand muffling the microphone,
Oh
right?
my
So,
gosh, that's so cute.
but it was cool because he got to sit, I ran a guided meditation where the participants, I would walk them through getting into these deep meditative states. And then,
Yeah.
they'd have like these visions. So then they got up and they're sharing this, like, oh man, then I experienced this. So he got to see that. And he was like, that's
Oh.
really cool. Like you should open a yoga studio back home. Um, and of course, Dawson, my daughter, my 6-year-old, uh, she's funny. So like we do a lot of meditations together to where
Oh.
now anytime she goes to a beach or a body of water, she'll always run up to the beach and then sit down and get like in lotus position. She's like, hold on, I gotta meditate,
Oh, that's so
Yeah, it's so funny. I have a
kids are awesome.
Yeah, so it's cool. Like the with the divorce, it's been interesting.
Mhm.
Um, but again, that's driven me to spend a lot more time. So we started playing Dungeons and Dragons on Tuesday nights now, right? Like, yeah, just
Yes.
spending time together, playing silly games, and I got a 6-year-old, so I bust out the player's handbook and I'm like, okay, we can't use this, right? So like,
Yeah.
just roll some dice, Dawson, and I'll pick your stats and we'll figure this out. But
That's awesome.
yeah, so now they're using their imagination, and so uh, I really think they've seen a lot of the change. And
That's
especially my middle child, he's noticed it a lot.
yeah. That's so cool. And
Yeah.
do you think like are you Are you in a place with yourself like, I'm proud of who I am and I'm a proud dad and I love who I am. Like, do you feel that way now?
Not 100%.
Yeah.
So I would say I'm working on that though
Yeah.
daily to where, looking back, it's like, man, look at all these people you've helped and all these cool things you've been able to teach your kids or show your kids
Yeah.
or, um, yeah, just making people laugh. Like I love it. But I'm also highly self-critical and oh my
Right.
God, there's all these problems coming and why aren't you
Yeah.
doing more? So, just average.
Yeah. I mean, it is an everyday thing, it's an everyday thing where you gotta, wake up, high five yourself in the mirror. You know what
Yep.
I mean? Like, I'm gonna be a badass today, and some days we don't feel like that. It's just true. But it's always good to know that like I am working on it and that's okay. I might
Yep.
80% today, 90% tomorrow. I'm gonna get to 100% because I know it, because I want it. Um, and so you've just recently started a podcast, right? Correct?
Mhm.
Yeah. So what made you want to start a podcast just to broaden your story and to help others and
So my brother pushed me into starting a podcast, and it was really about sharing. Hmm, he's the one who pushed me to start it, right, or at least get it going. I would say I always wanted to have one because I find a lot of people they feel oppressed by these weird views we have of God.
Mhm.
It's fascinating to me that especially being a dad. Okay, so
Yeah.
being a dad and looking at my children, there's no way in my mind I could look at my kids and be like, you know what, I think I'm gonna have my 17-year-old start a war with my 11-year-old and then go burn down his crops and steal his sheep and put his grandchildren into slavery or some shit. Like I couldn't imagine doing that to my kids, pitting them
Right.
against each other. And it's
Right.
interesting how a lot of people hold that belief about God.
Hmm.
And I don't understand. So for me, I really wanted to, I guess, just give people a different perspective,
Yeah.
back, and not really, it's not even different. See, that's like the funniest thing is it's back to kind of what Jesus was saying was like, hey, everyone's a sinner, right? Like he
Right.
who is without sin may cast the first stone, like love each other, treat
Right.
people like you want to be treated. And I think we lost a lot of that.
Oh yeah.
We really lost our way when we started defining all these rules of, it's Sunday at 6 a.m. You better be doing this or
Right.
you're burning forever. It's just
Right.
this. So that's what I wanted to just give people a different perspective, because I don't know if this was on this recording or if it was in the last one that was lost, but you had said something. Oh man, you had said something about how, the religion, people would act a certain way in the religion that kind of went against what they believed.
Mhm.
And let's take for example sin. If I can, so like God's like, hey, don't go steal automobiles, right? And I'm like, okay, I don't want to steal an automobile. Well, what happens if I accidentally steal an automobile? I'm like,
Right.
well, God will forgive you if you just go in that dark room and talk through that screen, like everything's good. Huh? Okay, sweet. So you go steal an automobile and then you go talk to the guy behind the screen, then it's like all is forgiven. Well, I think that, in some way paints a very different picture of, again, sin than
Mhm.
what I think God was trying to portray to people. Like, hey,
Right.
if you do things that harm yourself, that's what you should be worried about. Now, is I'm not going to be like, oh, is stealing a car wrong? Like, well, yeah, you shouldn't take other people's shit. But,
Yeah.
um, again, that's going to have consequences that are not good for you. It's not
Right.
like you're pissing God off because you went and you
Right.
took your neighbor's 94 Accord. Like God doesn't care about that. But you may be doing damage to yourself. Similarly, if you drink too
Absolutely.
much or, whatever it may be that you engage in.
Right.
And if people start thinking of it that way, like, well, okay, I can't just go. talk to the guy behind the panel and get forgiven of the over drinking, right? Like that's not going to take the hangover away. So
Right.
start looking at things like, okay, well, what's going to damage me? And do I want to damage myself? Look, if I want to go build, the coolest life I can, am I going to be able to get there with a car that has wheels that I keep throwing spikes under because I'm, spiting myself, right? I'm
Right.
sinning against
Right.
myself. Like that's a
Right.
very different view on things. But yeah, man,
Absolutely.
you think about it that way, I really don't want to hinder myself. So
Right. I'm
like
not going
maybe I
to
shouldn't be.
car.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's do things
exactly.
that don't hurt myself because God's not up there. He's like, hey man, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Okay, well I'm gonna jump off a cliff. It's okay. There's gonna be consequences
Right.
though,
Right. Right.
right?
Right. I think that's cool. And what is your podcast called so the viewers know? I'm gonna put it
Souls
down
on
in my notes.
Fire. Well, it's Souls on Fire Coaching. Um, if you look up that, I think I'm one of the top ones. But I've got to change like my naming and all that fun stuff.
Okay. So you can text me that and so I make sure to put it in my notes when this episode airs. And so I mean that we went through we've talked through so much stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, and that's
Mm-hmm.
life. I feel like if whoever's listening out there, like, who cares what story you have to tell? Who cares what it is? No one's gonna, we're not here to judge you. You know, there's gonna be people that judge you left and right. There's gonna be people who judge me for having a YouTube channel, right? It's like people are always going to judge you, but fuck them. Like you will need to be on your path of doing what's right for you. And it's okay if you have a past. It's okay if you have a story. It's okay if like, you've dealt with guilt or feeling like you've sinned. You have the choice to have your own path and break free from everything that you've learned that was not doing you good. Um, and so like Aaron, what would you say to like, the one person that's watching this that you could help of, not being afraid of their ghosts and, how to be vulnerable to know who they really are in the inside to becoming free.
So I'm gonna, give a very simple thing here that I'm
Love
sure
it.
people have heard and they're like, oh gosh, she's gonna say that. But it's something I ran from a long time, and that's sitting down and meditating, right?
Hmm.
Like that actually, I don't know why I feel like that one thing I ran from so long. And then when I finally did on several occasions, that's what got me to that next step was just sitting down and feeling those emotions. And when things start feeling terrible and you feel like you got to cry, sit still, sit still and let it come out. Cry, get to the point where you can't breathe because you're crying so hard, then call a friend and tell them about your experience so you can cry on their shoulder too. Just
Yes.
feel that, let it out, and then that'll give you a much clearer, I guess, path forward on how you start healing that and being different, right? Extracting that lesson from it, because that's the most important part. Bad
Right.
things that happen, where's the good in it? Look for that. What did I learn from that?
Absolutely. Because you just gain tools in your tool belt to become a warrior,
Mm-hmm.
free, and I wanted to I've started meditating, like I meditate every single day. Been doing that for like 3 or 4 years. And it's just awesome. Like your whole day is like different from how you talk to people, how you think about things. I might still have road rage when I'm driving because people,
Hard not to in Colorado.
I know. I'm like, what are you? Hi, I'm right here. you know, but I try to be better, right? I'm just like, okay. But
The Lord is testing me.
God, and it's just like meditation has brought me so much patience because there's a lot of things I'm not very patient about. But that's not like a troublesome thing in my life. There's just things where I'm just like not patient, but I am patient because I have to be, right? But it just shows you a lot of patience. And when you sit there and you close your eyes and you're doing breathing exercises, it calms your whole body down.
Hmm.
It puts you in this like state of being and listening to actually what not your brain is saying to you, what your heart is saying to you. And I've had experiences where people come into my meditations. I've had I have my both of my dads are passed away. I've had my stepdad in my life since I was one. My real dad, I've never met him, but that was my choice and I'm okay with that. But they've both passed on, but they have come into my meditations. My grandma has all it's and not everyone's going to have that experience, but if you really dig deep into these meditations of finding out who you are and who you need to be, it's really beautiful. And I don't know how you started meditating, Aaron, but for anyone who's watching out there, all you need to do is close your eyes and just breathe. There's all kinds of things you can look up on YouTube. There's Headspace, the app. There's Headspace on Netflix. If you are a Peloton, physical activity person, there's meditations on there. There's so many places. I'm sure if you reached out to Aaron, he would help you meditate. You know, if you reached out to me, I would help you meditate. Like because you can absolutely meditate with people if you wanted to. um, I have a
And that can empower a session.
absolutely, like I've never have meditated like with people before. I've always kind of like that would be cool though, and just have a group like that. I have a friend, he has a podcast called The Original Yogi, and he's in the military and he talks about meditation and practice and yoga all the time. He's amazing. I'll send that information to you. You reach out to him. He can teach you about meditation. So it's all out there. Like Aaron, how did you start meditating? Like, what were your little tools and tricks that helped you to do that?
Uh, I started, so I think I talked a little bit about the occult,
Yeah.
and kind of diving into that. I started that young.
Yeah.
So in different versions from different schools of thought, let's say,
Yeah.
there were different practices, which I didn't, at the time, I didn't realize it was, meditation, so to speak, but they were just little mental exercises that you would do for the purpose of controlling your mind, directing your thought, doing all this fun stuff. I probably didn't really get into breathing until much later because the exercises I did were all mental.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, once I started into the breathing, I met oh goodness, she was a yoga instructor and she ran like these shamanic breathing sessions. And I had one of the most amazing visions I've ever had just through shamanic breathing, which you do like these different stages of breathing, and then different time counts, whether you're in, out, the speed of all that fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that just fascinated the shit out of me. So it was like, dude, I can have a vision quest, off breathing. So I really started diving into that. And like you said, there are 16 billion different ways to meditate. Really, it's about sitting still, listen to your breathing, and just listening to the inside. And I wanted to add something to what you said. You said, not everyone will have that experience.
Right.
She's right. But I promise you, everyone will have an experience.
Yes. Well said. Well said. Well said, my friend. Well said. Yeah. I mean, it really has changed my life. And then like the days that I don't do it, if I'm just like having like the Sunday of like, I really need to do nothing and I forget to do that. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't meditate yesterday. But I give myself grace. I'm a freaking human being. We need those times where we just really need to detach from everything. And
Yep.
those days are okay too. Um, but I think your story is so beautiful. I think there's a lot of other deep things going on there that are also beautiful. I don't even know about them, but I feel like so connected to you. Because I feel like your story is a little similar to mine in different ways.
That was
And
very interesting. I did not know that about you getting kicked out and having a similar religious experience. And
yeah, yeah. So I think it's really this is the beautiful thing about sharing our stories. This is to you, Aaron, and to the audience, is like the connection.
mhm.
And the connection, when you start connecting to people, you will know that you're not alone.
Yep.
You know that you're not alone. You're like, well, shit, man, I've experienced that too. Like, let's talk about it, and that's where you learn how to be vulnerable with yourself and with another person. And when you start being vulnerable with other people, you can connect to more people more and share a bond. And it's like strength in numbers. I was literally talking to Daniel about this today. It's like he was telling me that, someone texted him, and what he was saying in his stories really helped him, like, be sober for, I think it was like 28 days or something like that. And Daniel was like, it just like brought me to my knees. Like, I know I'm doing something good. And it's because we're trying to connect with you and be there for you. Like, these episodes are for you guys to know that you guys are not alone. And you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Erin. I'm going to link, all of our Instagram pages in the link below. And just be prepared to just open yourself up, right? And be prepared for the experiences that you will have. They're going to be good, bad, sad, emotional, but it helps you grow as a person. And we're here to grow. We're here to become absolutely free, to absolutely need nothing, and to give that back, and to helping each other be a stronger community. Because especially now, I mean, being a hairdresser of 19 years, these last couple of years were the hardest, because you get people in your chair and they're just like so wrecked from the fear and the pain that our country is in. And I have to try to turn that around and talk about something good and like dive even deeper. I mean, it's better now, but there's still people out there that are just so consumed by this dictatorship and this fear and the news. And it's like, come on, you guys got to wake up. Y'all have to wake up out there, because you got to do something good for yourself, because we all have to be kind and love each other. I mean, I wish I can give you a hug right now. You know what I mean? I wish I could give everyone a hug right now. I love everyone so much. And I just, I hope that we, see more kindness through all the things that we're doing and all the things that you're doing, Erin. It's a really beautiful thing to be a part of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to add a note to that. Hopefully maybe this will mean something more to someone. We aspire Jesus to have, this divine background, or this divine, kind of purpose. It's interesting that he came down and told us that if we put seeds in the ground, they grow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Very weird for God to go through all the trouble of getting his son here to be like, well, if you put seeds there, they grow. It's like, it's pretty obvious. So perhaps he was talking about something else, right? And kind of to what you were talking about, how if you fill your mind with, oh my God, the world's being destroyed, there's all these bad things, there's all this ugliness, there's all that. If
Yeah.
that's what you constantly water in your head, that's what you're gonna sow, or you reap, right? Is all that bad stuff. You're gonna constantly see it in your life. So
Yeah.
maybe when Jesus was talking about be mindful of what you sow, it was what are you running through your head? Because as I'm sure you know too, a lot of your change came through changing the running dialogue that you
Yeah.
had in your head from, oh, this is the way my life is so terrible. Holy crap, I can be this free lady and build my own thing, right? And now, because you change that focus up here, it's radically different. It is. So
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, just keep focus on that growth, ignore all the trolley fear mongering, turn
Yeah.
that stuff off.
It's so true, and a lot of the time, I mean, even with, for you guys out there, Erin's a part of my coaching group as well in the Lions Den. And that call this week, what she was talking about, how you need to think more with your heart and not with your brain. I was like, because your gut, everyone knows that gut feeling is right. So trust it. Lead with your heart. Don't overthink anything that's going to add value to your life. And I thought that was really well said, because a lot of us, yes, our brains are powerful to make our decisions, but then our brains can turn on us and be like, it's like an angel and the devil coming up on you. And the first thing that you think of when it comes from your heart, that's usually the right answer. So lead with your heart, lead with love, and definitely know where you're planting your seeds. I mean, that is it's very simple, right? It's hard, but it's
Yep.
simple.
Yeah.
So, Aaron, I really appreciate you coming on my channel today. It means a lot to me that you were so vulnerable. Your story is beautiful. I know I've said that such a many, many times, but I think stories and humans it's just so beautiful. And I just appreciate you being on here. Thank you so much for sharing. Um,
Like, thank you so much for having me on. I was surprised when you were like, "Hey, you should be on my show." I was like, "What, me?"
Yeah. Yeah. So again, you guys out there, Daniel, who was on my podcast on podcast channel at episode 11. He has a cool mustache, if any of you guys remember. He's the one that told me about Aaron. He was like, and I've seen Aaron throughout the den, and he's like, you got to have him on your channel. And I was like, okay. And that's how shit happens. You start manifesting your life, you start manifesting things with other people, and other people come into your circle, and they just become your family. Like, it's awesome.
It is. It
So
really, that's
thank you,
seeing
Daniel,
how
if you're
that God
watching.
just moves alignments around, and it's
Yes, and it's just like that's been like the coolest thing about this is like, I'm broadening out my horizon. I'm creating this family, and I'm creating this family with you, the viewers, to be in this journey with us of becoming absolutely free. So thank you to the viewers who are all listening or still listening or whatever. We appreciate you too. So again, thank you, Aaron. If you have any questions, I'm going to put some links down at the bottom. But feel free to comment, feel free to share, and don't be a stranger. Reach out to us. We're here for you. Yeah. So
thanks so much for having me on, and thanks everyone for
absolutely.
listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So everyone, y'all have a great day, and we'll get back to you next week.